Looking for a simple way to stay rooted in God's Word every day? The Daily Bible Devotion app by Salem Media gives you morning and evening devotionals designed to encourage, inspire, and keep you connected with Scripture. Plus, you'll enjoy daily Bible trivia and humor, a fun way to learn and share a smile while growing in your faith. Get the Daily Bible Devotion app for free on both iOS and Android. Start and end your day with God's Word. Search for the Daily Bible Devotion app in the App Store or Google Play Store and download it today.
Welcome back to the History of the Papacy podcast, a podcast about the popes of Rome and Christian Church. Prepare yourself to step behind the ropes and leave the official tour of the story of the popes and Christianity. I am your host, Steve Guerra, and I thank you for joining me on this journey. Welcome back, everybody. I would like to welcome a very special guest, Paul McCarthy, author of the book, Don't Lose Your Dignity, Monsignor Leo McCarthy's remarkable 20-year battle for the hearts and souls of football fields and basketball courts in the inner city of Buffalo. And I was connected to Paul through John Fagant, who was just recently on the podcast talking about Buffalo history, who John was connected through another friend, Jerry Landry of the Presidencies of the United States podcast. So we have a lot of connections here. But I wanted to interview Paul because he has a fascinating book on a really piece of very interesting local history. And it doesn't fall necessarily in the time period we're talking about in this series, but it all connects. And I think that it's a fascinating story. So maybe, Paul, before we even dig into your uncle, Monsignor Leo McCarthy, maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself and a little background on yourself.
Well, I'm a retired network engineer from the IT business, and on the side, I coached for about 40 years, primarily football and basketball. And as you mentioned, Monsignor Leo McCarthy, we always called him Father Leo. He's the one who taught me how to coach and became my coaching mentor, and that was a connection we maintained throughout my entire adult life.
Why write a book about your uncle, Father Leo McCarthy?
Well, there was a time, Steve, when I was working with Father on the east side of Buffalo, in the inner city, in a very, very difficult time and place, a community that was ravaged by poverty and violence. And here is this man, very quietly under the radar, because he wasn't a politician. He didn't draw attention to himself, doing remarkable things for 20 years, and in the most difficult circumstances, accomplishing great things with these kids. And it seemed, I remember even at that time thinking, he's the best kept secret in the whole city of Buffalo. And it was such a remarkable story. And I felt like I was a witness. I worked with him his last 5 years of that 20-year ministry. I felt that I was a witness to history. And I wanted to share that because I think it's very, not only is the story itself significant, but I think, and maybe we can talk about it later, I think it has a lot of meaning, and it can be, each of us can apply something to our own personal lives from his experiences.
I find his background really interesting because he did that work, and when we get into his work, he worked in a really rough and tumble, really struggling neighborhood, but he came from kind of an idyllic community. Was it Alden? He was from Alden.
Grew up in Alden. At that time, he was a country boy, and he's a very interesting, as a youth, a very interesting character study. On one hand, very religious. He was an altar boy, very dedicated to the church. On the other hand, he was a hellion. He was a rough and tumble kid. He was a boxer. He played football. He's out on the streets, duking it out some of the toughest kids on the block and that kind of thing. So he was quite an interesting character as a young man. And when after 8th grade, at that time, you went into the seminary as a freshman in high school. More than a few eyebrows were raised as to whether this young man had what it takes to be a priest.
Yeah, the Alden really struck at my heart because we've talked about the history. Alden has such an incredible history, and I worked in Alden for 3 years, so I knew where that church was that he grew up in, and I drove by it every day going to and from work. So that really,
is that right?
Yeah, that really stuck with me.
St. John's.
Yeah. So, how did he enter the priesthood? You said that the priesthood, it was a little different back then. You had to pick your vocation, if you will, pretty early on in your life.
Yeah, he grew up in the Depression, and the father, he was one of 12 kids. He had a very successful business that went under because of all the financial pressures of the Depression. And so at that point, after that, it was a real struggle. A family that would be 14, put food on the table every night, and making ends meet. And from what I understand, the church gave him great clarity as a young man. It provided truth. It provided clear-cut answers to all the questions and all the turmoil that was going around him at that time.
And maybe we can talk a little bit about the background of Buffalo, because the Buffalo that we were talking about in the main series in the mid-19th century is a place that's absolutely booming and exploding economically, population-wise, culturally, basically any metric you can name. That's not quite the same story of the Buffalo of the 50s and the 60s, 70s that Father Leo worked and lived in.
Oh, night and day difference. And we can get into that at whatever point. But yes, he lived and worked in the midst of, through the 70s and 80s, in a very difficult, like I said, impoverished community that was plagued by guns and drugs and gangs at that time. Yeah, so quite a difference from the mid 20th century when Buffalo was just a booming city.
What's kind of the normal trajectory of a priest in that time period? Just before we step into Father Leo's career, would they have graduated from seminary and high school, gone to college, and then went into a parish and pretty much just stayed there for the next X amount of years of their career?
Yes, pretty much. Through high school years, he boarded downtown at the seminary. Then for undergraduate, went to St. Bonaventure University in Olean, after he was ordained. And it's kind of a funny story because he was ordained on a very, very cold day in February up in Western New York. And it was appropriate because at one point his father had said, years before that, it'll be a cold day in hell before Leo ever becomes a priest. So then from there, he started out maybe a year or so down in a small town near Salamanca, south, way out in the country called Little Valley.
And so he sort of bounced around a little bit. Was that normal in that time before you settled into a particular parish?
I believe so. From there, he was at St. Teresa's in South Buffalo. Then he moved to St. James in Depew, which is a suburb east of the city, and that's where our lives start to overlap. I attended St. James for grade school while he was an assistant pastor there. And in his early years, he developed a reputation, and he was known throughout Western New York, the Catholic community, as the Bing Crosby of Buffalo. Bing Crosby, the old movie Going My Way, he was right from the start. He was involved with working with the boys. Started the very first football team he started that first year when he was down in Little Valley. Then he started he loved music. He loved singing. He started a choir, a boys' choir in St. Teresa's. And just a real quick story, this just to kind of capture the spirit of Father Leo. He first came to St. Teresa's, had an idea, he wanted to start a boys' choir. So he went to the school. There's hundreds of boys at that time in the elementary school. So he came in and introduced himself and said he wanted to start a choir and asked if any of the boys were interested. And not one raised their hands, and they're snickering. And one of the kids said, "Oh, choir, that's for sissies." And so Father Leo said, because there was a nun teaching the class. Said, "Oh, I'm sorry, sister. I thought there were tough kids in this class. I must have the long classroom." And the kids said, No, we're tough. He said, "Oh, you're tough? Well, how many push-ups can you do?" So pretty soon he's got all these kids on the floor in the classroom doing push-ups. And he said, "Well, just maybe you can cut it. Well, I'm having a choir practice after school today. And the first thing I have to do is at least 20 push-ups. So of course, about 100 kids showed up for the first rehearsal, and and from there he started a very thriving voice choir. So just a little side story there. So then, after Depew at St. James is when he then was assigned to work in the inner city.
Hey, Steve here. If you're enjoying the History of the Papacy podcast, consider joining us on Patreon at patreon.com/History of the Papacy. We're working toward going completely listener funded, which means no more ads ever. When you join, you get early access to episodes, monthly book giveaways, and most importantly, your name is added to the History of the Papacy Diptychs, our own list of commemorated supporters. You can become an Antioch level supporter for just $3 per month, but it makes a huge difference to making the History of the Papacy ad-free and independent. Nobody likes ads, not you, not me, and I'm the guy who records them. So let's just get rid of them. Visit patreon.com/History of the Papacy and join today.
Need a daily spark of hope and direction? Let the Daily Bible app from Salem Media be that spark. This free Android app delivers an uplifting verse each morning, plus reading plans, devotions, and trusted podcasts from leaders like Joyce Meyer and Rick Warren. Prefer to listen instead? The Daily Bible app reads verses, reading plans, and chapters aloud, handy for the headphones moment of your day. Choose from versions like ESV, NIV, KJV, and more, and bookmark favorites to revisit later. Share inspiring messages with loved ones right from the app. Feel God's presence in every notification. Search for Daily Bible app on Google Play and begin your day with hope, purpose, and peace.
What's kind of fascinating to me is that, and we'll get into each one of these stories as we go along, is that he was a natural athlete and he seemed to have a real knack for understanding of football and basketball and all these sports strategies, but he didn't really have any formal training in any of them. And he didn't seem to have participated in any of these athletics, but he was an incredibly athletic person. Where did that come from?
Well, first, let me just share a quick story with you, Steve. When I was about 10 years old, I got a call from Father Leo. He wanted to go out to Father Baker's. Now, for many decades, Father Baker's was an orphanage started by a very famous man, Father Baker. And it evolved into, it was at that time a residential development home for very troubled boys, basically the last step before jail. So he wanted to go out and visit the kids. So we went out for a ride, and here's the Saturday or Sunday, and all these kids are sitting in the playground, and here comes this priest. And he's wearing all black pants, black jacket, got the Roman collar on. He comes walking up to the park or the playground, and you could just see the look on these kids' face like, oh, here we go. Some priest going to come in here, start preaching the Bible, start giving us a sermon. They ignored him. That was fine with him. So he walks up to a picnic table, takes his jacket off. Now he's got his shirt sleeves, and he is built like Arnold Schwarzenegger. He was a weightlifter. In fact, there's a thing called the 1,000-pound club. If you one bench press, one deadlift, and one squat, the total is over 1,000 pounds, you get in the 1,000-pound club. He may be the only priest in the 2,000-year history of the Catholic Church to remember the 1,000-pound club. Anyway, so doesn't say a word, and the kids are ignoring him. Takes his jacket off, does a handstand on a picnic table. He's holding there, and the kids are starting to pay a little bit of attention. He starts doing upside down push-ups. So he's vertical, his feet up in the air, head down, doing push-ups up and down on this picnic table. Now all the kids are kind of gathering around like, what is going on here? So he rips off a bunch of vertical push-ups, jumps down on the ground, says, and again, his little hook here, he's like, got any tough kids here? Oh yeah, we're tough. Oh yeah? How many push-ups can you do? So they all hit the ground. He starts doing push-ups, and the kids are doing push-ups, they all finally tire out. And he's still ripping them off one after another. Then he starts doing clapping push-ups. He pushes up, claps his hands back down on the ground. Then pushes up, slaps his chest with his hands back down on the ground, hops to his feet. And, turns to one kid and he says, oh yeah. He goes, you look pretty old. You must be what, 10, right? The kid said, what? I'm 12. What are you talking about? He's really insulted because you a kid at that age. Oh, you think I'm 10? He turns to another kid. He says, oh, I bet you're 9, aren't you? The kid says, no, I'm 11. And finally he starts laughing, and they realize he's just busting their chops. And then he starts cracking jokes with the kids or telling stories. And one kid says something very thoughtful, and father stops and says, hey, you're not as dumb as you look, are you? Now the kids are like, this guy is funny. So then he gets out of football, starts throwing football. He's chucking the ball down the field like he's an NFL passer and cracking jokes the whole time. Like if he overthrows a kid, he says, oh, that's my fault. I'm so sorry. I thought you were faster than that. Or he throws a ball and a kid hits the ball. Kid drops the ball. He says, oh, again, I'm sorry. That's my fault. I hit you in a bad spot. Your hands. So this whole ongoing dialogue, and I'm sorry if I'm going on and on here, but just one real quick thing. So he's going to leave now. So he's going to throw one bomb. So one kid volunteers. He's going to run a bomb. He's going to throw this. So the kid runs about 50 yards and turns around, and father waves him on. Now the kid's about 100 yards away. I mean, even an NFL quarterback can't throw a ball that far. Father waves him on, and the kid runs across the street all the way to the front. He's got to be 200 yards away. The father stops, waves goodbye, starts laughing, grabs his football, and walks to the van. And the kid's waving and says, Father, throw me the ball. And all the other kids realized that he just pranked that kid. He made the kid run. There's no way he could throw the ball 200 yards. And all the kids are laughing. This poor kid's standing there, Father, throw me the ball. He jumps in the van and drives away. And you think about that. I'll never forget the look of every one of those kids. Like, wait a minute. Who was that guy? He didn't preach the Bible. He didn't talk about Jesus. He didn't lecture us about our sins. It was just the opposite. Here we are. We're all these kids. We're troubled. We could be heading for jail, wherever this path is taking them. And here's this guy just shows up, but because he cared about us, a bunch of scrubs like us. And that kind of captures, I'm sorry, I kind of went off on a tangent there, Steve, and I apologize, but that story kind of captures the spirit of what he was all about.
He combined his sports and his faith together.
Well, I think first of all, he realized that if he wanted to reach boys, if he wanted to reach young men, a lot of them probably don't want to go to chapel or church service or go to Bible study. So he had to go where they were. They may not have the Bible study, but they love football and they love basketball. And right from the start, he found that it's great opportunities to teach life lessons, discipline, respect, sportsmanship, teamwork. And, in society, it's all about winning. You're winning, you're great. If you lose, you're nothing. He was just the exact opposite. It was basically, what is this all about? It doesn't matter what the scoreboard says. It doesn't matter what the other people say. It's what in your heart. If you did your absolute best, if you did everything you could possibly do and you played the game right and you conduct yourself properly, you're a winner. you're a champion. So he found sports as a means. He found the kids and went to them at their level. If I could just add one more thing, you had mentioned he never played on a formal football team or a formal basketball team. He became such a great coach. And I give him a lot of credit because he had the humility of a good learner. He knew what he didn't know. So what he would do is study other coaches, and learn from them, and then apply those lessons. The systems he developed for both football and basketball. And the book is a little bit of a coaching primer also, talks about the two systems, basically entirely what he learned from other great coaches that he found that worked for him.
I'm wondering, this is such a classic, getting kids involved in sports is a great way to get them off the streets. And how he worked with the kids who were struggling, it seems like a natural. I've worked with a lot of really great teachers who they know how to work with children who are struggling with those sorts of things, behaviors. It's a very different way than you'll often work with kids who are on the straight and narrow, and you have to understand that. Did the diocese or the bishop or somebody say, hey, Leo, you've got something working here? Did they ever put him into a position where he could develop a program to integrate these things? Was that before the time where we did those sort of things?
Well, for the diocese, he did things like for all the altar boys. And at that time, I don't know, 1,000. They would have like an outing at Darien Lake every year, and he was a chaplain for the Boy Scouts and things like that. But the sports, what he did with the sports, was very much independent. He was a very dedicated priest and pastor. But then when he went to what he did with those sports teams, he never once went to the church or the community for a single dollar, for any help whatsoever. He felt that this should be completely self-sufficient. And so, he built, especially now, when we came to the inner city, and again, a very, very troubled time on the east side of Buffalo. And you got kids growing up in poverty in a very violent environment. And at that, in that situation where a lot of absentee fathers, I mean, these were kids who had 2 strikes against them before they even came to the plate. So what he did, the work, that's what was so significant to try to work with these kids and reach them before they get to the point where what direction are you going to go? Are you going to join a team? Are you going to join a gang? And, there was and the thing is too, Steve, sometimes we see like the Hollywood version of these, the coach comes to the inner city and rallies the kids and they win the championship and everybody lives happily ever after, that kind of thing. The book, I really try to tell the truth. It's, and the overarching sense of the threat of violence and any point, him taking his kids and, because there was no parental involvement whatsoever, he ended up getting a 15-seat passenger van. And he had this big blue Ford van that was ubiquitous on the east side of Buffalo. Any time of the day or night, 12 months a year, kids had no rides to practice. They had no rides to games. In fact, we would go to the west side or South Buffalo or out to the suburbs, and the nickname for our team was the Black Orphans. Every other team would have all the parents and siblings and families at the sidelines, except his team, the Apollos. There's 15, 20 kids, and there's Father Leo and maybe another coach, and that's it. No parents, no community, nothing. So he would be out there. He went to pick every one of those kids up, took them to practice, took them to the games, brought them home. And again, all these the many situations they went into, you go into a park on a fall night under the lights in the east side of Buffalo, and all around there is all the gangbangers just looking for an excuse to start some trouble, or going to a gym in the middle of the winter and literally having to fight their way out of the gym, running down the hall while the kids are getting punched and kicked to get out of there and get in the van and drive away. I actually witnessed Monsignor himself, being physically assaulted, knocked out cold on his feet. But the thing, Steve, that was so significant, what he taught the boys is this. Doesn't matter what anybody else says or does. We will always do the right thing. And that's where we come to the title of the book. Don't lose your dignity. And he would tell the kids this over and over and over again. Well, Father, they said this. Well, Father, they said that. Don't lose your dignity. You're better than that. You walk away. Don't retaliate. They curse you. They shove you. You turn and you walk away and you do the right thing.
When he was coaching this team, the Apollos, that was sort of the high point of the drama, you might say, of the book. Approximately what time period was that, and how long was he the pastor at that particular church?
It was 20 years, right into the end of the 60s through the end of the 80s. And actually, his tenure, his mission there ended in tragedy. Because he lived right there in the heart of in his rectory, right there in the heart of the East Side, so he lived it. He walked the same streets. He ate hamburgers at the same McDonald's, went to the same gas station, anybody in that community. He would have a lot of people come into the house, panhandling. And one night, a couple young men became very aggressive, tried to force their way into the house. He fought them off and second-guessed himself later. Somebody said, well, why didn't you call the police at that point? He said, if I called the police every time I felt threatened, they'd have to open up a precinct. They'd be there every day. Tragically, he had been, a couple nights later, they came back. Father Leo was out that night. Another priest was home. They broke into the house, brutally murdered him. First got him to open the safe, took the money, brutally murdered him. That was the second. There was actually another similar robbery happened a few weeks before that to another Catholic priest, another part of the city. It was the same two young men who did this. So Father Leo was the intended target that second time, but just by chance he wasn't there that night. After those two were arrested, the trial this really shook the city of Buffalo, because these two priests were both, great men who, again, were brutally murdered in these robberies. And the trial drew a great amount of attention. In fact, Father Leo his testimony, from everything I had gathered from what I had heard, you couldn't hear a pin drop in the courtroom as he told the whole story. So after those two young men were convicted for murder, the bishop told Father Leo, I'm sorry, and Father Leo did not want to leave. He wanted to continue his mission. The bishop felt because of all the publicity, they had to move him out, and they transferred him way down to a town called Wellsville, which was way almost to the Pennsylvania border, about as far away as you can get from the inner city and still stay within the diocese.
This might not be of interest to most people, but where was the parish actually located?
Let's see, Moselle in East, I believe East Ferry in Moselle. The church was St. Matthew's. It's been sold. The Catholic Church has sold it off since. He had a school there. It was a whole block. There was a school, the church, and the rectory where he lived.
Oh, wow. Very interesting. What happens? Let's wrap up kind of where his career trajectory goes after this. So he's transferred to Wellsville in the way southern tier, like you said, almost Pennsylvania. And how long is he there for?
He went through maybe, let's see, I would say maybe a 10 to 15 year odyssey. He started there. Then they brought him a little bit closer, a town, Batavia, maybe about a 45-minute drive east of the city. He was a pastor there until I believe he reached mandatory retirement age of 75, and he went kicking and screaming. He's 75 years. He's still going 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. He was retired. He he finally came back to the city after so many years of being away. And from there, he connected with Cardinal O'Hara High School in Tonawanda, became the chaplain there, joined the football coaching staff. They went to 6 consecutive league championships, and he was also also assistant coach for the basketball team and chaplain, and he was actually inducted in the Hall of Fame at the high school.
Steve here with a quick word from our sponsors.
Need a daily spark of hope and direction? Let the Daily Bible app from Salem Media be that spark. This free Android app delivers an uplifting verse each morning, plus reading plans, devotions, and trusted podcasts from leaders like Joyce Meyer and Rick Warren. Prefer to listen instead? The Daily Bible app reads verses, reading plans, and chapters aloud, handy for the headphones moment of your day. Choose from versions like ESV, NIV, KJV, and more, and bookmark favorites to revisit later. Share inspiring messages with loved ones right from the app. Feel God's presence in every notification. Search for Daily Bible app on Google Play and begin your day with hope, purpose, and peace.
I wonder, what was the conflict? He was able to run his teams when he was the pastor of the church in the inner city, but sports is a big deal in a lot of Catholic high schools, and you have coaches who are fairly much professional coaches. Did he ever run into any sort of conflict with them?
Yes, he did. Well, he first came down to Wellsville, and he wanted to coach football, but at that time they already had a youth football program. They didn't need his help there, but someone said, well, maybe you can help out with that at the high school. So he was the assistant coach, and he showed up, and guys are like, who is this priest guy? Wants to coach football. Then they didn't know him from Adam. So he started working with the JV team. And it was an interesting story. At one point, the JV, there was one game, they're on the road, and they're losing 35-0 at halftime. Now, Father Leo, he adapted from what he had learned from other coaches, something called the power I formation. Basically, it's old school, 3 running backs, 2 tight ends, run the ball down their throat. And then when they adapt, then fake the run and then run a counter the other way. And then when they get on the counter, then fake the counter, run a bootleg. And then when they're on the bootleg, run a pass. So he had this whole system that he had put together. So through halftime, he said, well, how about we try the power I? And the coaches, at that point, the kids were so desperate. The coach will go ahead. So he set everything up. They get the ball in the opening kickoff, and they start driving the ball down the field. They're power right down the field. They score a touchdown. And, okay. And then the defense gets a little inspiration. Pretty much, next thing you know, the Wellsville JV team, they're on a roll, and they're scoring one drive after another, and the defense is holding, and they come down to the last chance they've got. They drive down the field for the game-winning touchdown, and Father has a system. You fake a run, and then you throw the pass to the right, and you fake a run, you throw the pass to the right, and then all of a sudden you fake the run, you fake the pass to the right, and you throw the pass to the left, and the kid's wide open, and he dropped the ball, and then he lost the game. But the kids came away from that. They drove back on the bus as if they'd won the championship. It was such an inspirational thing, but the coaches weren't too thrilled about it. And Monday morning, the head coach of the varsity calls him in his office and says, Father, we run our plays here. So no more of this power I thing. So, okay, he's the good soldier. He's the assistant. That's fine. Well, the team lost every game for the rest of the year, and they reconsidered. And wouldn't you know it, the next season, what's in the playbook but the power I.
Wrapping up, there's kind of a sad end to the story in a lot of ways, is that towards the end of his life, that's really the peak of where the Buffalo diocese and really the dioceses across the country are embroiled in this priest abuse scandal. And how does Father Leo get wrapped up into this scandal?
Yeah. what I wanted to do, Steve, I didn't want the book to be a puff piece. I didn't want it to be a Disney whitewash version. I wanted to tell the truth, the good, the bad, and the ugly. What does it take to accomplish something great in your life, and what sacrifices are made along the way? And what happened was basically at the state level, there was a extension for a year for abuse claims, where the statute of limitations was extended for a year, which I'm sure was done with all the best of intentions to give people an opportunity who were maybe ashamed or didn't have the resources to seek justice. On the other hand, basically, and the reality was it became a lottery. Well, why not? I get a lawyer. I'll give it a shot. I'll throw some accusations out there. Maybe they'll give me some money to go away, and free money. But the problem is nothing's free in life. And in a situation like this, maybe someone gets free money and someone else gets very, very badly hurt. And tragically, this man who gave so much of his life for 60 years, coached literally thousands of boys and young men all over Western New York. All of a sudden, out of the blue, comes a anonymous accusation. And sometimes, Steve, you'll hear something, an accusation about a particular situation or person, and there's just enough a hint of truth there that makes you think, well, maybe. But this accusation, in particular, the first one, was so completely, totally out of character. There wasn't even a hint of truth to it. No witnesses, nothing. And all of a sudden, this ends up on the front page of the city's major newspaper on Sunday. No reporting is done. No investigating is done. These are all an anonymous accusation with no proof, with no witnesses, in lurid detail. And after that came another. Again, no reporting, no investigation done whatsoever. And as if someone just randomly someone comes in off the street and accuses you of just something so horrific and untrue, and the media just prints it on the front page on Sunday as news without even any consideration whatsoever. So it was such a devastating, publicly humiliating blow. And at that point, as you mentioned, the diocese was really struggling with the abuse scandal. They had no choice but to suspend him until they could complete an investigation. He was devastated. This man who loves children, who gave his life, who literally risked his life in the inner city. So he was suspended, I'd say, for at least a year. He was not able to practice as a priest. He was not allowed to go anywhere near the school. And it broke my heart, Steve, at one point, because he was the assistant football coach at the high school. During a game, he wasn't allowed on the ground, so he sat in his van on the next street over and looking between two houses. So between the street and the two houses, then looking through the gap between the two houses to try to catch some glimpses of his boys, of his beloved football team as they're coming up and down the field in that tiny little field of vision. So at one point, the diocese hired a former FBI investigator, and got absolutely nothing. Again, no witnesses, no proof. No, the accusers were invited to actually come and speak to the investigators in the diocese, and they refused all communication, nothing. So, it took a long time. And it was interesting too, because I remember Father Leo telling me specifically in terms of the accusers, he said, I don't hate them. I can't hate them because that bitterness would eat me alive. But it really took a lot out of him. And when he was finally reinstated, now he was late 80s at that point, he was never the same, physically, mentally, emotionally. He started a physical health decline, and then we ended up losing him just a little over 2 years ago. So it angers me. It's to think about what was done to him, and he suffered very badly from this.
Yeah, I think it's one of those situations where it was an absolute disaster on so many fronts, the way the church handled it. And then when the state came in and the way they handled it, and the kind of the system that got set up is that everybody was guilty. And then, but the people, it was harming the people who were actually abused too, because then it cast a shadow of doubt on them. It was just kind of a snowball effect of just bad outcomes.
I agree 100%. And then how the media handled it was I could understand from the perspective of the church and the state government. All that is a very, very difficult issue. But how the media handled it and the public humiliation that Father Leo was subjected to was just unconscionable.
To wrap up here, what was really Father Leo's message to all of us? And as a priest, what would he leave us with today?
Well, Steve, something I think about a lot, besides just the power I formation in football or the 4-3 system in basketball. What does Father Leo have to tell any one of us, even if we don't play basketball, we don't play football? We look around the world, Steve, and like the Ukraine and the Middle East and all the horrific things that are happening and the people that are suffering, and we just feel powerless. There's nothing what can we possibly do? But Father Leo's message, and there's something I really think about a lot more since I wrote the book, is we can still make a huge difference in our tiny little corner of the world. We can bring peace, maybe not to the Ukraine or the Middle East, but we can bring peace to our own little corner of the world. And he said, don't lose your dignity. Always do the right thing. And that's all right. That's easy until it's not. We're not going to walk down the street and curse somebody, just randomly pick somebody and curse them. We're not going to walk down the street and shove somebody randomly because it's not the right thing to do. But what if they curse us first? What if they shove us? What if they insult us first? Does that change the rules now? Does that make it okay? Where before this was the wrong thing to do, now is it the right thing to do? And Father's message was no. It doesn't matter what anyone else says or does to you. You still do the right thing. Don't lose your dignity, your value, your essence of your mental and your spiritual self. Don't give that away, no matter what anyone else says or does. And it's hard to do. And I've tried to live up to it. And I'll be honest with you, I've fallen short many times. When someone hurts us, our initial reaction is we want to hurt them back rather than step back and walk away and say, no, I'm going to preserve my dignity no matter what. So that's why I made the title of the book, Don't Lose Your Dignity. And it's a reminder to me as much as anyone else that no matter what anyone else says or does, let's strive to do the right thing.
And the book, it's widely available on Amazon, Kindle, any of the places where you normally get books. From my research, it looks like this is your only book. Do you have anything else in the works?
Well, I'll tell you, writing a book is hard. I had no idea. It took me about a year, and all the rewrites and edits and going and just reading through my work over and over and over again until even I was sick of it. So it's I found out that if you want to write a book, you really have to be inspired because it's a lot of hard. I mean, it was very, very satisfying. And so many people who all over Western New York, whose lives were touched by Father Leo, bought the book and reached out to me. So I have no regrets. I'm so glad I did it. It helps me preserve the memory of someone who was my uncle, my mentor, one of my best friends also. But I have to be pretty passionate about something to put that kind of work into it again.
Reading the book, it felt like a natural book to turn into a movie. The story of the hard scrabble coming up in the Depression, take the team in the inner city and mold young men. You got the scandal, you got the whole arc there, and he can do the 1,000-pound club. Who would you picture as the actor in this movie? I have a feeling you must have thought about this.
Yes, I have. Oh my God, yes. Maybe as a young Father Leo, maybe you're Mark Wahlberg. I actually have considered in my mind house. You become a dreamer. Maybe somebody in Hollywood would be interested in making this into a movie. But as I mentioned earlier, the Hollywood depictions of these stories, like The White Shadow. Remember the TV show, The White Shadow with Ken Howard, or Coach Carter with Samuel Jackson. And that's nice at the Hollywood version, and everyone smiles, and it's a big success at the end. And the team wins the championship. But this is real. If you really want to go into a difficult, impoverished, violent environment that's prone with and plagued by violence, what does it take? And I just want to add one more thing, Steve. And I don't. In terms of trying to tell the truth, I try to make it clear. Father Leo, he was just flesh and blood. He was, when I was a kid, he was Superman, right? Doing the upside down push-ups and all that. But as I got older, I came to realize, he would be just as frustrated and angry and exhausted as any of us. But he had the faith and the determination and the resilience to overcome that and still do great things. So I wanted to paint a human picture of him, not to diminish him at all, but anyway, maybe to raise up the rest of us. He's no different than anyone. He was no different than us. He was flesh and blood human, just like the rest of us. If we had that kind of faith, if we had that kind of determination and resilience, we could do great things too.
Yeah, I think that's the greatest thing about it, is that you really did show him as a 360-degree character, and that it wasn't really just a hagiography.
Right. And I think that does him tribute. Like I said, I think that raises up all the rest of us. Well, if he can do it, well, he's flesh and blood, just like the rest of us. And and there are people, I know people that consider him to be a saint. There's a couple McCarthy courts throughout Western New York. There's a McCarthy football field in South Buffalo, and I can't tell you how many times we would go to a basketball court or a football field anywhere in Western New York, and soon there's a crowd gathering. Oh, Father, yeah, I played for you back in the day, or I coached against you back in the day, or on and on and on. He touched like I said, he coached literally thousands of young men in those 60 years.
The Historical Jesus Podcast is the sweeping saga of the life and times of Galilean Jesus of Nazareth, as well as the faith, religion, and church founded to honor and disseminate his acts and teachings. Join me, Mark Vinette, on this fascinating journey through time, exploring the many great works of Christian theology, literature, architecture, music, and art inspired by the words and deeds of Jesus Christ.
Need a daily spark of hope and direction? Let the Daily Bible app from Salem Media be that spark. This free Android app delivers an uplifting verse each morning, plus reading plans, devotions, and trusted podcasts from leaders like Joyce Meyer and Rick Warren. Prefer to listen instead? The Daily Bible app reads verses, reading plans, and chapters aloud, handy for the headphones moment of your day. Choose from versions like ESV, NIV, KJV, and more, and bookmark favorites to revisit later. Share inspiring messages with loved ones right from the app. Feel God's presence in every notification. Search for Daily Bible app on Google Play and begin your day with hope, purpose, and peace.